Hey, it's Jeff with Austin Bounce House Rentals, and today we're out here checking on bouncer safety. Safety is something that is job one for us at Austin Bounce House Rentals. We take it seriously and we will not set up if it's not going to be safe. Now, in our industry, they regulate safety a few different ways. They look at anchoring as one of the elements of safety, how we stake the units down or secure them if it's not on something we can stake into. They look at the materials used. They want to make sure that the materials are fire retardant, which actually has some industry history to it as to why it's relevant, but otherwise I would say it's probably the least relevant threat to a bounce house unless you're going to set it up in a fire pit. They talk about lead, and lead content is something that's been an old story in America, but recently product from China that's not being overseen properly, either by its American counterpart or by the buyer. Product from China has made it over here with enough lead content to be considered unsuitable for consumption and banned from sale. So that's something that we don't worry about with the equipment that we buy in terms of how it's made and where it's from, but all of our equipment is lead free and fire retardant, so we've got that covered. But again, talking about safety, there's three areas. So there's the materials, which we covered, there's the securing and anchoring, which we lightly covered, and then of course there is wind. All right, now wind to me is its own category because it's the single biggest threat to the safety of a bounce house installation. So the way that we combat that is we have, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, we have these anemometers that are basically wind speed gauges, and we use these anytime there's windy conditions where we think it might be at the threshold levels where we won't set up, which is sustained winds over 15 miles an hour. So, and also you have to be careful with certain gusts. If it's not too windy but there's huge gusts of wind that are like 40 mile an hour gusts all of a sudden out of the blue, obviously you want to consider that as well. With wind it's interesting because you might hear something on the news that, okay, it's windy today, we're going to have 20 to 25 mile an hour winds in Austin. Well, great. What does that mean to my backyard? Something totally different because of topography, the way that your house is positioned with other homes in the community, the way that your backyard faces with regard to a hill or a valley. So there's many factors that will determine what the actual wind conditions will be in your backyard, even on a windy day. We've got one example where during Hurricane Harvey, we actually were able to set up a few of the backyards because of the way they were set up in terms of where the wind was coming from and kind of the hill they lived on or the valley they lived in. We were able to safely set up during so-called hurricane. Now obviously, we don't recommend that, but the reason we can be confident in setting up on a windy day is because we use these guys. And these are real easy to use. You basically power it on here. I don't know if you can see this, and we have it already set to miles per hour. We're going to set it to max, so that way it'll hold the max wind setting. So if it's gusting a little bit, it'll save the fastest wind speed that the anemometer experienced during that session. So I'm going to create some fake wind since it's not windy at all out here. We'll see how full of hot air I am. Okay, so that was 8.5 miles an hour. So that's, a little more than half of what would be acceptable to set up a bounce house. So, there's quite an allowance. So if you see it's windy out, I wonder if it's going to be safe. Yeah, it's going to be safe. It's rare that we get over the 15 mile an hour or higher sustained wind speed in this part of the country. I mean, there'd have to be a tornado or some other kind of event for that to be the case in most cases. Now, again, there's exceptions with topography. I mean, if you're up at Circuit of Americas on the top of a big bluff, yeah, you're going to get some wind shear up there because of the nature of the topography. But if you're in a regular community in Austin or around Austin, one of the areas around the city, you're not going to have a huge amount of wind. There's a lot of shielding just from the development and the flat ground for most of the areas. Hill country, you've got some up and down, but generally speaking, Texas is fairly flat, so it's fairly predictable. But hopefully this sheds some insight on the single biggest threat to bounce house safety, which is wind, and gives you a little more confidence in our ability to provide safe installations for your kiddos and their friends. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the party.